and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrop, and we should have a countdown clock on our desk as we await the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage. But we don't know when it's coming, so we can't have a countdown clock. But we suspect the very end of June. We'll see.
And in the meantime, actually, the Supreme Court did make a decision in a marriage case this week, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Some things got worse in this country. North Carolina and Michigan enacted anti-LGBT laws since we last spoke with you.
It's true, but the United States House of Representatives passed a pro-gay amendment to a housing bill, but it is unlikely to become law.
Hillary Clinton is going for the gay in her big campaign speech.
Shoring up every little part of the populace that she can. The mayor of South Bend, Indiana, has come out.
The Pope disses gay families again.
In a Magna Carta art installation at Runnymede, the contributions of historic gay figures are incorporated.
Rapper Mikki Blanco has come out as HIV-positive.
And Andy has another raft of theater reviews.
Which we can talk about.
My Perfect Mind, Consent, and Chris Noth and Dr. Faustus.
Chris Noth and Dr. Faustus. Okay. We'll start, well, you know, we spent a lot of this season, you know, talking about the big backlash against same-sex marriage.
Yes.
55 anti-gay bills in all these states, in 27 states or something. And 5 of them passed, and a couple of them this past week. In North Carolina,
I don't think we should skip over the fact that only 5 out of 55 passed. We were quite panicky a couple of months ago about all these anti-gay bills, anti-same-sex marriage
Congratulations,
bills.
America.
Very, very well done.
Especially in places like Texas,
absolutely,
where there were a ton of them.
Yep.
But not in North Carolina. Well, in North Carolina, they overrode the governor's veto of a bill, so now it's going to become law, that says government magistrates can refuse to perform marriages to couples if they object on religious grounds.
The silver lining to this is that, say, a same-sex couple comes in and wants to be married by the local magistrate, and the local magistrate doesn't want to do it. If he wants to refuse to perform that marriage, he has to refuse to perform all marriages for at least 6 months. So it's not like, you know, he may try to weasel around this. I don't know who's keeping track. But technically what the law says is that this has to be a blanket refusal to perform marriages for a period of time. You can't just one day say, I'm not doing them, and then the next day change his mind. It has to be a significant.
Well, when the governor vetoed the bill, he said we can't get into the business of letting government officials decide who they're going to provide services for. They have to provide services for everybody.
They are government employees, and they must
You take an oath to uphold the Constitution or things like that.
So he did veto it, but both houses of the legislature have overridden the veto. Some think this is challengeable in court, and they will, on the grounds that public employees do have to uphold the Constitution. But because it seems to have this sort of blanket exemption, they may or may not get away with that.
North Carolina, which was, you know, the emblem of the New South many years ago, has moved far to the right because the Koch brothers and others invested heavily in state legislatures in 2010.
Yes.
Well, we were all asleep out there, you know, because there wasn't a presidential election on the ballot. And that's why these things can happen.
It's important to pay attention to local elections and who's gaining power, because this is real power. But because it is a bill that deals with public employees and religious reasons, they may be able to challenge it in court.
All right, tell us about Michigan.
Well, in Michigan, we were unsure whether Governor Snyder, who is a conservative Republican, would sign a bill passed by the legislature to allow state-funded adoption agencies to make decisions about who they will deal with in adoptions and foster care placements on the grounds of religious reasons. But in fact, Governor Snyder, who said in the middle of Indiana Governor Mike Pence getting into trouble over his religious exemption law, that he would never sign anything like that.
I think he said he was for a gay rights bill too, didn't he?
He did some sort of gay rights bill, although he's, he's avoided doing that in Michigan. But he signed this adoption agency religious exemption bill on the grounds that the state could not afford to put any adoption agencies out of business because there are too many kids who need to be adopted. Well, now, why you give the state funds to religious agencies who are going to discriminate to perform these services is the question.
I mean, again, we go through this in New York. If you provide a public service and you're a religious agency, you're supposed to sign something that says you won't discriminate on the basis of religion, of anything, sexual orientation, race, anything. Because you're taking public funds, and don't take public funds if you don't, if you want to uphold your religious beliefs.
Well, this is one of the conservatives' favorite little hobby horses these days, and their favorite lines of attack. If we allow gay people to marry, and if we pass non-discrimination laws, it will put these wonderful Catholic adoption agencies out of business, as in Massachusetts. Well, it doesn't have to put them out of business. They're choosing to go out of business because they don't want to be forced to not discriminate.
Open up your agency in New York. I was talking to Donna Lieberman from the New York Civil Liberties Union this week, and she said, we're all missing the boat on what's happening in New York, which is that Mayor de Blasio, the great liberal out there who won't endorse Hillary Clinton because she's too conservative, right? Maybe that's true, but
he maybe has some personal animus from running her campaign and getting shoved to the side.
Correct. I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
He was her campaign manager when she ran for Senate successfully. But the new contracts for religious agencies now say you may favor your co-religionists in all hiring and services and everything else. It's an absolute outrage. This is New York, and we sit here complaining about things going on across the country, and New York in many ways is a backwater when it comes to religion.
Even Florida Governor Rick Scott has signed a repeal of the No Gays Can Adopt law 5 years after it was ruled unconstitutional by the state courts there.
It hasn't been enforced for 5 years, but Mississippi only voted for the right of women to vote a few years ago.
And the governor going on record as signing that repeal is, puts him out there publicly for saying that gay people or gay couples should be able to adopt or be foster parents.
By the way, in the cases of North Carolina and Michigan that we told you about, Lambda Legal said these are worse than the Indiana original Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, and they promised to help those who are discriminated against by these laws.
Now, while the great LGBT activists in Texas have beaten back a couple of dozen proposed anti-LGBT laws, there is still action there on a couple of things. The Lambda Legal Defense has now filed a lawsuit on behalf of a lesbian couple who were married in California and are now living in Texas, and one of whom is a state employee, at least one of whom. She tried to get her wife spousal benefits
at the University of North Texas,
and was refused on the grounds that her marriage was not recognized in Texas. So,
now, this is a violation of federal guidelines for those receiving federal funds, and anyway, a lot of the other universities have gotten with the program on this. The Fifth Circuit has yet to rule on the case there that struck down the Texas marriage amendment. They're waiting on the Supreme Court.
Yes, which, as we say, may happen any day.
Well,
but meanwhile, in Texas, marriage clerks there who said they would refuse to issue marriage licenses, no matter what the Supreme Court did, are reversing course. They are now planning to extend their hours and modify their forms to allow for same-sex couples if the Supreme Court does legalize same-sex marriage.
And as I told you at the top of the show, the Supreme Court did make a ruling on marriage this week in Kerry v. Dinn, They said it is not a constitutional violation when the U.S. consul in Afghanistan denied a visa to an Afghan national married to an American citizen. And why this is significant to the same-sex marriage case is because Kennedy did not sign on to the Scalia complete right-wing decision on this and found alternate grounds to reject the claim that were more compassionate.
Well, the basic Scalia line was that the U.S. had defined the Afghan as a potential terrorist, right, and that they were allowed, the U.S. was allowed to deny the visa on the grounds that this was a terrorist, even though they had the right to marry.
I mean, usually marriage confers the right to bring your spouse into the country. I mean, that's certainly been the tradition, but it's not an absolute right, apparently. No. At least so says the Supreme Court. And by the way, a new poll says that 2/3 of you say that same-sex marriage will be legalized by the court. 65% now have a close gay or lesbian friend or relative. 35% have a close bisexual friend or relative, and 11% a close transgender friend or relative.
And as we await the decision by the Supreme Court of the United States, cities and towns around the country are making plans for rallies to either celebrate or condemn the Supreme Court decision. And you can find out what's going on in your local area by going to the website uniteformarriage.org and check out your city or town, or post something that you know is happening in your city or town.
Some good news from Michigan, Moraga, Michigan, where the Keweenaw Bay Indian community opened marriage to same-sex couples. It was a close vote, 5-4, sort of what we expect from the Supreme Court. And congratulations to Ted Snowden, a Broadway producer. He married Duffy Violante, a massage therapist, and the ceremony was performed by a universal life minister in New Paltz named Evan Wolfson, the father of same-sex marriage.
You know, I performed a few marriages before they were legal.
There you are.
Just symbolic marriages for lesbian friends years ago.
That's nice.
Well, yeah, not all those couples are still together. And I found myself very uncomfortable in that role. I would, you know, stand up and supposedly perform the ceremonies, some better than others. And I'd go to the reception afterwards, and people would treat me like a minister.
Did they ask for your blessing?
No, but they were, you know, there was this sort of standoffish religious figure kind of relationship.
Were you wearing a white collar?
No, but I was, in one case, I had a nice little suit on, you know, some, whatchamacallit.
Well, it puts up barriers between people.
Eileen Fisher suit with some nice, colorful little scarf around my neck. I hated it, so I swore never to do that again. So don't come to me. I'm not getting ordained as a universal life minister, and I'm not performing your wedding.
Okay.
But congratulations to the 7 Chinese couples who were married in West Hollywood. A website in China ran a contest for same-sex couples in China who wanted to travel to the U.S. to get married legally. Why they didn't just go to Hawaii, I don't know, but they ended up in L.A. And 10 of them won, but 3 of them dropped out before coming to the U.S. But 7 couples ended up coming to West Hollywood. We have some pictures. Oh, there they are. Very, very happy couples. In fact, we have a second picture that's even closer up and happier, I think. Oh, they're weeping at their wedding.
With joy.
Now, of course, this is a little shocking to the Chinese population, but this is going to be publicized all over China by this website. So these really are some brave people who came here to be married. And
like the people married in San Francisco when
Gavin Newsom was doing it?
Well, I mean, I
don't think they faced the same. They didn't face the same opprobrium from the population that these Chinese couples might.
And I wouldn't try this if you live in Saudi Arabia. More about which later.
Yeah, but
by the way, I was watching a film from the 1987 March on Washington the other day. There was some clips on television that Andy told. No, was it? Yeah. No, it was Jeremy Hooper put up from our coverage of it, and Troy Perry and everybody was in tears at this marriage ceremony.
I remember that ceremony.
Yeah, I was there.
Robin Tyler put that together.
Yep.
And it was considered outlandish.
Oh, yeah. What the hell are you doing?
Marriage? What the?
1987.
Yeah.
We did it in front of, I believe, the IRS or someplace like that.
And there were hundreds of couples. Yeah.
They were all out there.
Yeah.
We didn't. This wasn't just invented 5 minutes ago. As you saw from that documentary, that
PBS Independent Lens ran the documentary Limited Partnership, the story of Richard Adams and Tony Sullivan, who were married in Boulder, Colorado in 1975.
Binational couple, so it was all about trying to keep Tony in the country. He was an Australian. It was a very, very moving story, and it's still running around the country on PBS stations. So look in your area.
You may even be able to find it online under the Independent Lens series on the PBS site.
Do some Googling.
Limited Partnership. But of course, the most poignant and shocking moment is always when they got married in Boulder. It was a legal marriage at the time, although then ignored, but they wrote to the federal government to apply for citizenship or a green card for Tony, and got a letter back from the INS saying, you have failed to prove any bona fide marital relationship can exist between two faggots.
That's what the letter said in black and white.
The letter from the Immigration and Naturalization Service of the Department of Justice of the United States government. So that alone makes this film worth watching.
It's terrific.
And
they're pioneers.
They really are, and they stuck to it for many, many years. One of the nice things about the film is seeing them over a period of time.
Yes.
And thank you to the Methodist Conference of Florida, which passed a resolution same-sex marriage now legal in Florida, and their resolution says that Methodist ministers should be allowed to perform same-sex weddings.
But former Governor Jeb Bush is hoping that the Supreme Court will overturn that.
What is he going to do when he has to face Donald Trump in those debates? That was the depressing moment of the week, having to listen to the racism of Donald Trump.
Well, I listened to Jeb Bush's speech, his opening of his presidential campaign, and he made a big thing about when it comes down to a choice between the little sisters of the poor and Big Brother. I'll take the little sisters every time. This is the dispute over Obamacare and contraception. Man, it's going to be an ugly couple of years. I feel like not watching it and waiting to see.
Well, that's the thing. You know, on the one hand, you think, oh, all these candidates, and they're all wacky, and this is going to be so entertaining. But you spend 30 seconds listening to any of them, and it is so depressing, and you feel just filthy. On the other hand, Hillary Clinton was in New York on Roosevelt Island last weekend giving a major speech and reaching out in particular to the LGBT community.
Oh, she said Republicans have turned their backs on gay people who love each other and those of us who don't love each other.
And we must ban discrimination against LGBT people. She is very pointedly trying to shore up her support.
Yes.
I'm all for that.
She came out for same-sex marriage over a year ago.
I was going to say 2 years ago, yes.
It is 2 years ago.
And someone wrote on BuzzFeed this week, there was an interesting write-up about the debate over Bill Clinton maybe supporting same-sex marriage in the year 2000. It didn't happen. It was only considered for about 7 seconds, but it was an interesting piece. I have very mixed feelings about Hillary Clinton, but I so wish she were a better speaker.
Yeah? I watched the thing. I thought she was okay. I mean, we don't have a choice here, you see. This is a nonpartisan show.
It is. We are not supporting anyone in particular, not yet. But
we do have to rate these people as they go along.
As it depresses me to watch the Republican candidates, it makes my heart sink a little to hear her delivery, which I find not charming.
Okay.
Anyway, in other national news, Caitlyn Jenner visited the Los Angeles LGBT Community Center to talk to kids for a couple of hours.
Yes, how'd that go?
As far as I know, fine. I haven't heard anything bad about it.
South Bend, Indiana, where Notre Dame and St. Mary of the Woods colleges are. The mayor there has come out of the closet. You know how to pronounce his name.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
He said he did it to help students who are struggling with their sexuality and to help older people who might not know anybody gay, and now you do.
Did we put up the picture of him?
Did we put up the picture of Pete There he is.
The South Bend mayor. He's kind of cute. He's actually younger than he looks in that
Yeah,
picture.
how old is he?
Not all that old. He's one of the youngest mayors. And he wrote a very thoughtful column in the paper to talk about coming out. And not quite as serious was the public announcement by the high school grad in Raritan, New Jersey, Maxwell Barrett.
Got a picture of him.
He put his picture in the yearbook, and under it is a quote that says, "Of course I dress well. I didn't spend all that time in the closet for nothing."
And this was rather controversial, but it got through. And after all, if you read the quote, what's controversial about that? He's just talking about how he dresses.
The author is listed as unknown. I don't know where that comes from, but it was very cute, a very cute way to come out. And he was surprised at the level of support he got from everybody.
Including his parents.
Yeah, I don't think he should be so surprised.
Well, kids are coming out these days.
Yeah. Unfortunately, someone who came out a while ago, the former Speaker of the House of Representatives in Rhode Island, Gordon Fox, who we talked about a lot a couple of years ago because he was the House Speaker and he was leading the fight for same-sex marriage.
And he's openly gay.
And openly gay. And then he got nabbed for corruption. And he got convicted of taking bribes and using campaign funds for his own personal use. And he's now been sentenced to 3 years in prison. And he's apologetic and rueful and said it's all due to his own greed and stupidity. And he regrets all of that.
Oh, well. Well, we got some good news. Fayetteville, Arkansas strengthened their LGBT rights law this past week. And Bellevue, Idaho, the city council there passed an LGBT rights ordinance, but...
Well, there are a couple of caveats. You know, small homeowners don't have to rent rooms to LGBT people, but I think that's fairly standard.
Do they have to rent them to African Americans?
I don't know.
I mean, in New York, in most human rights laws, two-family houses are exempt from human rights laws.
Yes.
You can have whoever you want in the other half of the house,
but then
unless you advertise it.
Then the other strange thing was that you know, there's a religious conservative on the city council who was concerned about, you know, trampling on the rights of religious organizations, and he kept being assured that no, ministers would not have to marry same-sex couples, and the employment rules applied only to non-religious employees. But then he was assured by the city attorney that judges would not have to perform same-sex marriages because they are state employees, and the state does not have a non-discrimination law that includes sexual orientation or gender identity.
We're going to get into this after the marriage decision comes down, assuming we win both parts of that case, because there are going to be a lot of things that still have to be covered after that happens.
Yes. In other political news, the U.S. House of Representatives passed an amendment which enshrined Obama's executive order that federal contractors have to not discriminate, and this had to do specifically with housing contractors, must have a non-discrimination rule. But it's a bill that Obama is likely to veto because it has cuts to Amtrak and infrastructure funding.
But the amendment passed 241 to 184. All Democrats voted for it, and 60 Republicans voted for it.
That's a step forward.
Yeah. So I mean, why don't you just pass a federal LGBT comprehensive law? Get it over with. What are you holding out on us for?
Well,
it's Pride Month.
It hasn't been introduced yet.
Well, it's coming.
But it's coming very soon.
And who knows what's going to happen in the New York City St. Patrick's Day Parade. I know we talk about this a lot, but it's kind of a bellwether kind of a thing. Last year, we reported that as a compromise, they let NBC's gay corporate group march so that they wouldn't lose NBC as a sponsor. Well, the guy who runs
as a broadcaster of the parade.
Yes, and a sponsor.
Yes.
They provide
the biggest funder of the parade.
They provide a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the head of the parade, a guy named John Dunleavy, very right wing, he wasn't happy about this. So they
had sort of circumvented him to do this.
He's running again for president, and he's saying, I want to get rid of any gay group. And we're fighting for an Irish LGBT group. So now the guy who's from Quinnipiac College, who's on the committee, says, we got to let a second group in, or, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And Dunleavy is looking for another television station to broadcast the thing so he doesn't have to.
Well, he's been turned down by the local Fox station, Channel 5.
Fox
and
won't even do it.
won't do the St. Patrick's Day parade because of this controversy. He's reached out to Channel 11, PIX, but I don't think we know if they've answered him yet. People who are describing him say that he's still angry about what happened this year with the parade. And it looks like there could be a big split in the organizers. And then there's a rumor that the Irish government is petitioning New York for a big parade a month or so later around Easter to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Irish Easter uprising in 1916.
Led by Patrick Pearse, a gay poet, one of them. He was put to death over it.
Well, there you go. There's our alternative next year if we need it. We'll see whether that happens.
That'll be great.
But meanwhile, their pride parades around the country this month are bigger and better than ever based on everything that's been happening. For instance, in Indianapolis, site of all the brouhaha over the Indiana religious freedom law this year, 100,000 people showed up at the parade and festival.
I spoke at one there about 20 years ago. They have it in where that memorial to the Civil War is, and we were in that little circular park in this traffic circle, surrounded entirely by marchers, anti-gay marchers who were parading around the edge of it. Well, you couldn't fit 100,000 people where we were, so that's great. And of course, you know, it's great to have the mayor there being so supportive.
Who's been a big supporter.
Yeah.
In Washington, D.C., 150,000 at the Pride Parade, including Boy Scout troops marching for the first time now that they have integrated LGBT people into the
And there will be Pride contingents for Chelsea Manning support in Boston on June. Well, that's happened already. St. Petersburg, Florida on June 27th, San Francisco and Seattle on June 28th. Go to chelseamanning.org for more information.
And of course, there's a huge, huge festival and celebration going on in Philadelphia on 4th of July weekend to celebrate the 50th anniversary, 4 years pre-Stonewall, of the demonstrations at Independence Hall that were Frank Kameny, Barbara Giddings. Tracy Baim of Chicago's Windy City Times has a big new book out about Barbara Giddings and what a heroine she was.
Absolutely.
And if you go to lgbt50.org, you can find the entire schedule of events in Philadelphia for 4th of July weekend.
By the way, when we were talking about the mayor of South Bend, we should have talked about the bad thing that happened in San Antonio. They elected as mayor the anti-LGBT candidate in the field, Ivy Taylor, a Brooklyn-born city planner.
Well, to me, the really bad story of the week has to do with transgender activists from Central America, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Panama, who were invited to come to Washington, D.C. for a meeting of the Organization of American States, which is a long-standing, huge governmental agency that represents the entire Americas. And so they were invited to come and talk as human rights advocates about their situation in Central America, which is a very dicey place for transgender people these days.
Most of them, yeah.
The U.S. embassies in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Panama refused visas to these people to travel to the United States. In El Salvador and Guatemala, the U.S. embassy said to these transgender advocates, you've had previous problems with the police, so we don't want you to come. Yes, they've had problems with the police who harass them on a regular basis, beat them up, arrest them for no reason. Yes, they have had problems.
Well,
and the Panama U.S. embassy said, well, we don't think you have strong enough ties to Panama to be sure that you'll come back here and not just stay in the U.S. This is someone who's a native of Panama, lives there all her life.
Right.
This is ridiculous.
Well, I mean, Stephen Fry, the actor, and his husband, Elliot Spencer, went to Honduras for their part of their honeymoon, their round-the-world trip that they're taking gradually, and they had a lot of problems in Honduras about being gay. You think?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to read your app before you go there.
Here's the part of this that I find really disturbing. You know Randy Berry, the new envoy for LGBT human rights around the world, appointed by Obama, traveling around the world to deal with all this and tell other countries what they should be doing. He was asked about this denial of visas to these trans advocates. It's not an issue of discrimination.
Well,
really?
I mean, this is the guy who went to Jamaica and did not bring up their anti-buggery laws in his discussions with the government in trying to confront them about the anti-gay atmosphere there.
Wow.
Well, and then
all talk, no action.
Well, and then there's the openly gay ambassadors from the United States to various countries who wrote this big letter supporting the Trans-Pacific Partnership and how it's going to be good for the gays, even though it's going to be a relationship with places like Brunei, where the death penalty is existing for gay people. But that Pride at Work really put the full court press on this LGBT group.
Really good.
And I'm not saying there was a huge coalition against this thing, and it lost in the House.
It's still, they're still fighting over it. The Obama administration is still trying to rescue this. There are a lot of problems with this proposed trade law from our point of view. One is doing business with these anti-gay countries without doing anything to build in any protections for gay people.
AIDS stuff.
And that's the other thing. It is once again a vehicle to prop up the profits of the pharmaceutical companies, which are the highest profit
and it's a way to bypass all kinds of laws
industry
that countries have by companies saying, well, this is an international thing and you can't apply this local law to me.
Yes, it allows corporations to sue countries for trying to regulate them. And the biggest problem of all of this is that they did all this in secret. They wouldn't let anyone read the laws.
I still haven't read it.
Exactly. And how can you vote for something when you can't read it? And doesn't it make you suspicious when they won't let you read it?
Well, there was a big article in the Times about how our generation and people a little older than us have done very well in this country in terms of benefits and pensions and all those other kinds of things, and how the younger generation isn't going to get this. And one of the big reasons is the North American Trade Pact that Bill Clinton pushed through and Hillary Clinton strongly supported. Obviously a lot of Republican support as well, but that's what's been breaking down this country.
Thus, the opinions of Ann and Andy.
Yeah. Well.
All right.
Well, on the other hand, the White House did have its first forum on combating domestic violence and international bias-motivated violence versus LGBT people. It was a closed meeting.
I was going to say, also in secret.
Yeah, but it had participants from around the world and that envoy.
Yes, Randy Berry. All right.
And speaking of federal stuff, we lost Len Hirsch. We have a picture of him there, a D.C. activist. He was the co-founder of Federal Globe, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender employees of the federal government in the late 1980s. And served
very
there
important organization.
In 1997, they got sexual orientation removed as an issue in security clearances. He was only 59 years old, survived by his husband, Christian Fauschald. They were together for 30 years. Condolences.
Couple of school stories. In Gloucester County, Virginia, the ACLU has sued the school board for barring trans students from the regular bathrooms and forcing them to use alternative private ones. A trans boy used the boys' room without incident for months, but the kids were fine with it. But parents and residents got wind of this and complained. Now he feels stigmatized and humiliated. It's like, there's a campaign, and we should show more of this, of trans kids, trans people. You want some guy a trans guy who is now burly, hairy,
mustache,
to use the ladies' room.
Women's room. That's what I've always said. You want this. You want someone who looks like me to use the women's room.
Crazy.
Anyway, and in Efland, North Carolina, a town of 700. After a student was called gay and told that he acted like a girl, a teacher stepped in.
Third grade boy.
Wanted to do something about it, Omar Curry. So he consulted with the administration and read the book King and King, which is about two princes who fall in love.
Given to him by the assistant principal to read.
Meg Goodhand. And there was three parents complained, and now these people have resigned.
The teacher and the assistant principal.
Yeah.
There's supposed to be a big town meeting about this, or school board forum or something tomorrow, the day after we're taping, which is before you're going to see the show, but we hope to have some more news on this next week after that meeting. A couple of...
staying with the schools for a second.
Sure.
Crafton Hills College in California. After one protest, they added a disclaimer to the syllabus for the English course that teaches books like Fun Home. And,
Tony winner?
And Persepolis. These are graphic novels. There were complaints of violent and pornographic content. I mean...
Have you read the Bible lately?
How about the Bible? I mean, seriously, why is there a trigger warning on Roman Catholic churches? You're going to go in and witness a man being tortured to death in a statue, and I'm not making fun of it, but that's what it is.
Context. It's all context.
Right. Come on.
Well, speaking of torture, there's a bad story out of Delta, Utah.
Oh, yeah.
A gay man attacked repeatedly at home and at his business. His business was vandalized. He was robbed.
21 years old.
His bricks thrown through the window.
They carved die fag into his arm.
Yeah, terrible. So they're trying to track down the assaulters, the attackers, but no word on that yet. But the attacker in New York City, in our neighborhood, from the Dallas BBQ restaurant, the guy who was shown on cell phone video bashing gay men over the head.
Beina Lechem El Amin.
Turned himself into the cops. Now, the real question is who hit who first?
Yes, I know. Well, they've charged him with 2 counts of felony assault and 2 of attempted felony assault against Jonathan Snipes and his boyfriend, Ethan York Adams. But again, this was a fight, and we don't know all the details.
Well, what we know is that the gay guys got up to leave, knocked over a drink. People sitting there started making crude remarks about them, and they came back to confront the guys who'd been making remarks. Now, who hit first is the question. There are stories that the gay guys actually hit first.
There are stories that the alleged perpetrator is gay. So a lot has not been sorted out in this case, and so we're not. And
so we don't know, but he has turned himself in.
And Michael Sam has quit up in Canada. He's left the training camp in Canada for personal reasons.
I was saving that for entertainment news.
It was
well, he was playing for the Montreal Alouettes in the Canadian Football League, and the day before the first preseason game, he left to go home to Texas and was given permission to leave by the team. But a week later, when he hadn't reappeared, they suspended him. So still a lot of confusion about what's actually going on with him. Meanwhile, international news.
Okay. Well, in Australia, the ruling Conservative Party, which is called the Liberal Party, is worried about losing 5 Senate seats if they have a conscience vote on marriage. And that's why it's not happening. 68% of Australians say they support same-sex marriage.
The Pope is going to Paraguay on July 11th, and the big news is that a gay leader there, who is married because it is legal there, Simone Casal, or maybe he was married somewhere else, Simone Casal has been invited to a public roundtable of civil society leaders meeting with the Pope.
And he's highly critical of the church he's not just, he's highly critical of what the church teaches about gay people, which is wrong. I mean, it's wrong what the church teaches.
We'll see how much of a chance he has to actually speak and have a conversation.
On the other hand, on the day before Pride Day in Rome, the Pope got up and lectured everybody about the importance of heterosexual parents. The group Dignity in America, Marianne Duddy Burke, said that this leads to the refusal to honor and support families that don't look like the model held up by church officials. And she would like to meet with you, Holy Father, when you come to Philadelphia this fall.
Wouldn't we all?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
But the lower house of parliament in Italy has passed a resolution urging civil unions and equal treatment throughout the nation for same-sex couples and LGBT people.
And by the way, there's a lot of talk about the Pope's leaked encyclical on the environment. It embraces the science of climate change, but it rejects the science of population control and contraception.
Mozambique decriminalized homosexuality, the 29th African country to decriminalize homosexuality, rewriting its laws. There are still more countries in Africa that do criminalize and even have the death penalty for homosexuality. But things are moving, and we should not stigmatize all of Africa as anti-LGBT.
And there's been a lot of progress that we've reported in Israel on LGBT rights, but a ministerial committee there for legislation voted down a bill to make all anti-LGBT discrimination illegal. The sponsor of it said on Pride Week, some of the Likud, who is the ruling party, tried to paint rainbows on their faces. Don't be fooled. Behind that, you'll find their true faces. He's pretty upset.
But the estimate is that 180,000 people showed up for Tel Aviv Pride.
Including Shep Wanan, our friend.
Shep is everywhere.
He was there.
And in Belfast, Northern Ireland, we have a picture of this, 20,000 people showed up on a march for the legalization of same-sex marriage.
This is the only part of the United Kingdom that doesn't have same-sex marriage.
Yes, and it had been rejected by their Parliament recently, although the Belfast City Council passed a resolution in favor of it. But the movement is growing because their neighbor to the south, Ireland, has, of course, voted overwhelmingly to legalize same-sex marriage. And there was also a huge turnout in Singapore for their annual LGBT Pride event, the Pink Dot. This is
a dot. Of dots.
Somewhat ragged dot of 28,000 people.
It looks like Australia.
Well,
no.
It could be any number of things. But it's their biggest Pride ever. They had a lot of corporate sponsors for it this year. And
28,000.
Anti-gay protesters have started a new movement where the LGBT supporters wear pink. They are wearing white.
Government says, we're not ready for same-sex marriage, so don't get any ideas. Now, in Seoul, Korea, South Korea, of course, the court there ruled that the police cannot ban the Pride March on June 28th. The right wing intends to picket it again in large numbers.
Well, hundreds of them showed up already with drums in a big protest against Pride and the queer cultural festival. But it looks like the parade will go ahead on June 28th.
In Saudi Arabia, the police, and by the way, this police commission is called the Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and the Prevention of Vice, raided gay parties in Jeddah, arrested a bunch of people. Now, the penalties over there for homosexuality can vary from fines and imprisonment to 450 lashes. This is one of our greatest allies in the Middle East.
The parliament in Germany seems split on same-sex marriage. They lag behind in European countries in legalizing same-sex marriage. The upper house, the Bundesrat, passed a resolution urging marriage equality.
For the second time.
But the lower house, the Bundestag, is likely to refuse to go along with that.
Angela Merkel, who heads the government, is afraid of losing her coalition if she does it, and so she's not doing it.
Well, just like all the Republican candidates here.
All right.
And tell us about the Runnymede celebration.
Oh, well, it's the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta, if you didn't know. And so they have this big ceremony at Runnymede, and there's an art installation of 12 juror chairs that was dedicated there by Prince William. And it includes the stories through symbols of Oscar Wilde's Ballad of Reading Gaol and Harvey Milk's Megaphone, and along with signs of Gandhi, Mandela, and Emmeline Pankhurst. By the way, there's very little of the Magna Carta that we still use, but one of them is trial by jury. And Prime Minister Cameron used this as an occasion to speak out against British participation in or having a Human Rights Act. He wants to substitute some kind of a Bill of Rights and separate themselves from Europe.
Well, I don't know enough about that.
Okay.
AIDS news. Really interesting story of a rapper, Mikki Blanco, who came out as HIV positive.
The picture of him. There he is.
Now, he has assumed various identities over the years. Sometimes, or some people think he's gay, some people think he's trans. He says he's been HIV positive throughout his rapping career for the last 4 or 5 years. He says, I'm censoring myself, F stigma and hiding in the dark, this is my real life. I'm healthy, I've toured the world 3 times, but I've been living in the dark. It's time to actually be as punk as I say I am.
I just can't imagine living in fear, having people call me brave, and it being a lie.
He was involved in protests last year against the Russian anti-gay propaganda law.
He was arrested in Portugal for being gay.
How does one get arrested in Portugal for being cruising?
Yeah, you can still get arrested in New York. Ask Robert Pinter.
That's true. And he released an album last year called Gay Dog Food.
Okay.
I haven't heard it. I don't understand.
Attention, Chicago. Health officials there are recommending meningitis vaccines to men who are HIV positive and men who are having anonymous sex.
They have uncovered 5 cases of meningitis, and they want to stop it in its tracks. So in Chicago, please consider getting the meningitis vaccine. The White House has, we talked about where the Trans-Pacific trade bill was. Well, in the midst of all the secrecy, the strong-arming, the negotiations, the White House told LGBT and AIDS organizations that they would lose funding and access if they condemned the Pacific trade bill.
Hardball. Let's play hardball.
Oh, my God.
Well, I mean, come on. Politicians have always kept people in line. I mean,
Valerie Jarrett called up the Human Rights Campaign, which couldn't be, of course, less effective, and yelled at them for condemning the Pacific trade bill.
The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force came out against it.
As did Pride at Work, but so did HRC, and Valerie Jarrett called them up and yelled at them.
That political game has been played for years, for centuries. The NIH has had 14 years of flat budgeting from Congress, but they're willing to give them a big increase. But you have to emphasize diseases other than AIDS, basically is what they're saying to them. There's been some resolution to the Chelsea Clinic problem where we live. Where they
Maybe. A couple of ACT UP people went over to test that and said, we want information about where to get tested. And
the clinic was closed here.
The clinic is closed for 2 years for repair. It was the most used public health clinic in the city for HIV testing and treatment. And the city has shut it down without offering alternatives. But they claim now that we'll have vans there, we'll refer you to closer testing than 100 blocks away. So the ACT UP guys went over there and they were given a little piece of paper. They asked where the testing was free at these places. I don't know. Where's the van? Somewhere. We're not sure. So they may claim they have a solution to this, but really not yet.
No.
All right, entertainment news. Miley Cyrus came out to her mother as bisexual at 14. She now says she is open to anyone legal, doesn't relate to being a boy or a girl, and her partner doesn't have to. Mom scared, her mother was scared she was going to hell, but now accepts her. This is the future. We talked about Maria Bello and the Whatever book, and that's how people are going, and there's more and more of this.
Whatever.
Exactly.
Maybe we'll call this Whatever USA.
Thank you, Miley.
All right. I told you how enthusiastic I was about James Lassine's Absolute Brightness of Leonard Pelkey, which ran downtown at Dixon Place for a while. Well, with Tony Speciale directing, it's opening at the West Side Theater on July the 9th at 407 West 43rd Street, so watch for that.
We heard from a viewer who's been continuing to watch The FAUSTUS on ABC Family Channel, which we've talked about before. It's been joined by a new show called Becoming Us, which is about a boy and a girl who are boyfriend and girlfriend, and both their dads are transitioning. as into trans women. It's an unscripted reality show, and the viewer who alerted us to it, and I've read references to this elsewhere, say it's pretty good. And it's called Becoming Us, and it follows the Fosters. ABC Family is doing some good programming.
I think many of you may enjoy the new play Consent at the Black Box Theater by David Rhodes. It's basically a pickup by a recently out NFL star who's been married to a woman, and a Yale grad student who's gay, and it turns kinky. That's thus the word consent. It is so sexy, there you see, it is so sexy that some people walked out, and they had to walk out right in front of the stage because it's a small theater. That's William McCullough Thomas there is the older guy, and Michael Goldstein is the younger guy. It's got a compelling dynamic. It could be tightened up quite a bit and still make its points, I will say.
Next week, on June 23rd, there's going to be a public forum to discuss the potential of making the Stonewall Bar and Park across the street a national park. The discussion will take place at 7 p.m. at the LGBT Center on
I'll be there covering it.
13th Street. I'll be out of town. But if you want to be part of that discussion, June 23rd, 7 p.m. at the center. And meanwhile, you know, we talk always about the Stonewall Bar, but there have been a number of LGBT bars around town, and one of them, one of the old ones, the Candle Bar, formerly the Candlelight Lounge, on the Upper West Side.
When it was a lesbian bar, apparently. They said back in the 20s even, it might have been a lesbian
I wasn't
place.
around then.
No.
But it is closing. It's on Amsterdam between 74th and 75th, and there's still a little time to go there to celebrate your youth if you want.
All right. I saw at 59 East 59th with Bill Ballman, our associate producer, My Perfect Mind. We have a picture of that. This is the British actor Edward Petherbridge. He went off
on the right there?
On the right with the Crown. He went off to do Lear in New Zealand, and he had a stroke during rehearsals. So that's what the whole thing is about what the stroke did to him. And he's obviously back because he can perform on a stage there with the guy he co-wrote the play with, Paul Hunter. And it's directed by Catherine Hunter, no relation. And it's by turns wacky and insightful. I think there's a lot to savor there. I think you'll enjoy it.
I haven't been following the basketball playoffs, but congratulations to the Golden State Warriors for winning the NBA championship, mostly because they have the out-gay president, Rick Welts, who used to be with other teams, came out some years ago as an NBA executive, and he is the celebrity grand marshal of the San Francisco Pride Parade this year, so you can go out to that and congratulate him. I have been watching the U.S. women's soccer team at the World Cup, where the lesbians are winning the day. Abby Wambach, Megan Rapinoe, big stars for the U.S. team, and written about their partners in the papers quite openly and casually. So I'm happy for them.
Leading the way.
Yes.
And the other play I saw this week was Dr. Faustus. I'd never seen it, by Christopher Marlowe. He wrote it a long time ago. It's at the Classic Stage Company, starring Chris Noth. There, you see him, you know, big from Sex and the City. It comes across more as children's theater than a seminal Renaissance work, but I kept sitting there thinking, given how funny they were trying to make it, it would have been better if the guy making the deal with the devil was Donald Trump, or somebody acting like Donald Trump. And I mean that in all seriousness, because Donald Trump has made many deals.
Aren't we going to have enough of Donald Trump?
With the devil. It would have made me enjoy the show more.
Not if you'd watched his whole press conference yesterday.
He's one of the antichrists.
He really is.
And he's very anti-gay.
Very depressing. Congratulations to Geeks Out, the LGBT techno crowd. They held the first East Coast LGBT Comics Festival, FlameCon, in Brooklyn this last week. Now, Chris Cooper, our,
co-host,
third in command, is a big part of that and wanted us to mention it, but he can explain it all to you next week because he's going to sit in for me while I...
By the grace of God and the will of the Holy Spirit, Chris will be with me next week to talk about these issues and other things.
Yes, I thank you, Chris, for sitting in, and I'll be back the following week. And a couple other things. Next Friday on the 26th at 7 p.m. at the LGBT Center, they're doing a performance and cocktail party of the lesbian opera Patience and Sarah that was produced in 1998 as part of the Lincoln Center Summer Festival. It's a terrific opera. I saw it at the time and was a little involved in the production. And Friday night, the 26th, 7 p.m. at the center, just Act 2 they're doing. And it's quite interesting and fun.
Okay. As long as we're speaking of entertaining comments and things, I read this article in the Times about this Reverend John McCluskey, who was with Opus Dei. He's famed for converting famous Republicans to Catholicism, including Robert Bork, Robert Novak, others, Louis Lehrman. Anyway, some of the comments that this guy has made, he wrote that gay culture has hurt male friendship because, especially in big cities, two men or a small group of men seen socializing are likely to draw stares from others and the unspoken question, I wonder if they're gay. He says, and thus, many heterosexual men skip the hassles and embarrassment by not socializing with other men. Are you kidding? This guy also, he was a campus chaplain at Princeton, and he distributed lists of courses that Catholic students should avoid.
Did you see the movie The Good Lie?
No.
About the lost boys of Sudan who come to the U.S. It's a very charming movie, and I caught it on cable this week. And there are these three guys who come who consider themselves brothers. It turns out they may not actually all be related, but they're just wonderful, wonderful characters and people. And it's played by actual lost boys from Sudan. And Reese Witherspoon is their sort of sponsor, and she's sort of funky. And it's a terrific movie, The Good Lie. But at one point, these guys are on a farm, and they're walking towards some cattle to see them, and they're walking hand in hand. And this guy, who's Reese's boss, looks at them and says, I wish they wouldn't do that. I thought, really? Isn't that a little gratuitous?
Yes. But we live in gratuitous times.
Yeah, but I still love the movie, The Good Lie. And there's a movie showing in New Orleans this week, next week, Wednesday the 24th at 7:30 p.m. at the Britannia Theater. It's about the fire at the Upstairs Lounge in 1973 that killed 32 people, 32 gay people. Mostly
from the Metropolitan Community Church.
A lot of them, yes.
Because they were socializing there.
It was arson. It was deliberately set. And the movie is called Upstairs Inferno. I hope we all get to see it at some point, but it's playing in New Orleans on Wednesday, so you might look for that. And online, there's a new series on NBC BLK called Living Color, Love is Revolutionary When You're Black and Transgender, which you also might want to check out.
There's so much to choose from, and we're glad you still come here and watch us on Gay USA, listen to our podcast, watch us on YouTube, on wherever you see us. And if you want to be on our email list, write to me, andyhum@aol.com, and have a wonderful trip.
Thank you.
And see you next week, Chris.
Bye-bye.